Let's turn to educational matters, and you are going to be talking about code of discipline and so on, but you have a question from a concerned parent, John. Tell us more.
Yeah, I came in there just a few days ago, Alan, and it kind of triggered me a little bit. It was the parent had said to me that their student who was, trying to figure out whatever job they wanted in life or career direction they're going into, had been told either by someone in the education system, whether that was a teacher or not, that they really couldn't go into the area that they were hoping to go into, that they would have no aptitude whatsoever. So it kind of led the student to kind of question their ability. Now, the staff in schools give advice for the very best possible reasons, and often it's based on results and performance. So there will be some justification for that. But I always say to students, and I would always say to students, don't let anyone ever tell you what you can or can't do. Now, you have to be realistic. If you're failing maths from first year upwards, you're not going into brain surgery. Come on, let's be realistic about it.
Very true, but I often hear these, stories, and maybe they're the rare ones, I don't know, but, people who go on to great success in sport or in arts or whatever it might be, and they say, a guidance counsellor told them you shouldn't do that, it's never going to work out, and they proved them wrong. But it is a difficult one.
I wouldn't.
You don't want to be given delusional kind of notions either.
No, exactly, but I wouldn't hone in on career guidance as such, because they certainly are doing their best and they have to work on metrics and data that they have. Yeah. But it is very dangerous ground as an adult to tell a student what they can and can't do, particularly to say to a student, look, you've no aptitude there, you can't do that, and forget about it. Because they've often gone on to prove the exact opposite. So really hold on to whatever that dream or ambition is and get good advice on it. But if the advice is not coming from someone, who has qualifications to make such an assessment, then completely and utterly ignore it, because it can set a kid off or student off on the wrong path, and that's not good. I can't tell any student, whoever came in front of me, what they were going to end up at. And one of the greatest joys I would ever have, seeing students 5 or 6 or 10 years after leaving, is to see them drive by in a big car, or to hear that they've launched the business or that they've become successful. Well done.
And when they pass by in that big car, do they wave out the window, or are they shaking their fist angrily at you?
They do make some gestures, Alan.
How many fingers are involved in the gesture? That's another story entirely. Yeah. Okay, no, that's a fair enough point. Let's move on to, because we were touching on this last time as well, code of discipline. So yes. How does a school operate their code of discipline, and what could lead? What is the kind of straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of a student being placed in detention?
All right, but just first of all, we look at the bigger picture, the kind of helicopter view, in the sense that classrooms in primary or secondary are now microcosms of what's happening in society. So the students will present into school into a group of professional teachers, and the teachers want to give them the best education they can have at their ability. But the problems that the students are seeing outside school are going to manifest within the school, and some of those problems can lead to a student acting out in school. Now, acting out is one thing, but if the acting out in school is affecting teaching and learning, then you really have to do something about it. So first of all, is the acting out due to undiagnosed educational special needs? Well, then the answer there is that you go to the system, find out what's wrong, and put in the remedial actions that schools are so well equipped to do it now. I'm really so proud of the work, particularly in the school I used to work in, with their pastoral care system and their Department of Special Needs back there in Rice College, where students who were recognised to have these educational needs are really well cared for within the mainstream sector, and they were brought out for their one-to-one lessons, and that kind of took away what might be misinterpreted as bad behaviour. If you're sitting in a class and you don't understand what's going on, or you're really having trouble with comprehension, you're going to act out as a child because you're frustrated and bored, and you're even questioning yourself. But that doesn't mean that it's bold behaviour per se. Now, part that. Kids are kids. Students are students. There is bold behaviour. If a teenager doesn't challenge within a school, then I think there's something wrong there. If they float through without ever coming to the top, I'd be more worried about that.
Is that a difficult balancing act, though? Students who do question, but does it depend on the scenario, what the topic is or issue is, and the scenario in which that happens, like questioning a teacher in front of the rest of the students, to the point where maybe it undermines their authority.
Yeah,
is it difficult, delicate kind of?
No, that's a good example of what I call affecting teaching and learning. If you're questioning a teacher, it should be about the subject matter that they've put in front of you and that you don't understand it, or indeed that you have a new idea to give to the teacher on this subject. I've often learned so much more from the students in the classroom than perhaps they got from me when I was teaching geography and English, because they would come up with a different perspective on what you're doing. So to hear that and to celebrate that is fantastic. When it becomes questioning a teacher just to disrupt the class or to get the focus on yourself as the class clown, then you need to be you do need to be dealt with for the sake of the others in the class. 40 minutes is a short time to get a body of data transmitted to students in such a way that they all understand it in a mixed ability teaching setting where there's so many different modes of learning in that classroom, and one teacher trying to balance all that. You haven't time for class clowns, particularly in the juniors and leaving cert. I remember being obviously in school myself, and you'd been a subject that you struggled with, and I'm thinking of maths, and there was one or two in the maths class who never let the teacher get the job done, and the rest of us really didn't like that carry on because we were trying to learn. So the school has to protect at all stages teaching and learning. That's the basics of any school. If that's not happening in a school, it's failing in its duties.
Okay, one of the points you want to make, John, which I just want to touch on now, is the difference and the huge difference between how you handle students in those first 3 years of school as opposed to the second three. So 1 to 3 as opposed to 4 to 6. And I'm curious about that. Maybe you might expand on that. Is it primarily to do with students who reach years 4 to 6 being more mature, or are there other elements that feed into the different approach?
Well, no, you've hit the nail on the head in many ways. Students 1 to 3 need more minding, and need more care, and need more direction, and they need more, they just need, they have more needs, they have more questions. And to mind, I use the word kids, these still are very young kids, and they've just come out of primary. So we need to mind them. The most critical years, the two most critical years in secondary school are first years and leaving certs. First years need to be helped to settle. 6 years need to be helped to do the best they can to move out the other side of it. But as a deputy principal, I would have found that your discipline issues really would be involved in 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 those years, whereas when students became 5th and 6th years, you're dealing with a much different type of person. They've come to know you, they've come to understand the school is there for them, and they're happy that you can talk to them, and it can be a partnership approach. They'll walk down the corridor, they'll pass you, "Good morning, sir," and you say, "Good morning, Alan," and that's the way it is 90% of it with the senior cycle students. The discipline issues that creep into senior cycle are rare enough, and if you have a student disrupting in senior cycle, you really have to act, because you're dealing with the leaving cert and they've got one shot at this.
Schools, when they approach their code of discipline, is important as well, in terms of like schools that either they don't enforce the code, and it's a bit kind of like, parents who've had their like 5th or 6th child and they're worn down. That child gets away with murder compared to the ones that came before it. Alternatively, the flip side of that is schools that are very regimented when it comes to their code of discipline and heavy-handed. And also, what about teachers who maybe perhaps more experienced teachers, John, who have been in the game a long time, maybe aren't overly happy with how their school do or don't enforce their code of discipline, say, well, look, I've got my own particular brand or code of discipline, and they're kind of going rogue with how they deal with it.
Well, I'd say to them straight away, no, you do not have a separate code of discipline.
Stick to the script.
And if you enforce that code of discipline, which is not the agreed code of discipline, the school is not in a position to support you if you make mistakes, and you will, because you're operating outside the school structures. You're operating without the support of your board of management, and if you walk into trouble by something you say or something you do, or if you land someone into lunchtime detention, which is not part of this code of discipline, and even if you're supervising that, it's not agreed by the parents' council, it's not agreed by the students' council, and their voice must be heard, and it's not agreed by the staff. So you're operating a very dangerous situation. You cannot operate as a lone wolf in a school when you have an agreed code of discipline. That is a critical document that parents, students and teachers all have created. So no, I would never support that.
Okay, we'll move on because you do want to touch on, we've had the recent, much like the recent Grand National at Aintree, the finish line is in sight for those in the junior and cycle or the leaving cert. That finish line, they can see it, the final few furlongs, not many school days left. So what advice would you have for students who are going to be doing the junior leaving cert in terms of making the most of that time, being as productive as possible and ensuring they put their best foot forward for the junior or leaving cert?
Yeah, good question. And this is a kind of critical time for students. I think when I counted this morning, there's about 31 active school days left in the calendar. Now that's still, you've a bit of time there to pull yourself together if things haven't been.
That is sufficient, is it? I suppose
we're scratching the bottom of the barrel. Yeah,
okay.
if they were really, if they really made a massive effort between now and then, of course they'll improve their grades. Okay. I'd beg leaving certs all across the county, do not leave school early in May. Stay as long as you're able to stay within the classes, even if those classes are small, because the smaller classes you'll get much more individual attention. I don't like the idea that leaving certs are released too early. It's the time to keep them and support them and keep those structures going and to keep the revisions moving as much as possible. I know people are tired, but this is a time where we need to concentrate. To third and sixth years, I'd say, have you assessed where you underperformed in the mocks? Where did you go wrong? Have you a study plan to deal with this? Get that from your subject teacher. Have you gone to your subject teachers or year ahead for help? If you're struggling, you're going to keep struggling unless you reach out for help. The school is only delighted to help you and give you those plans. Are you actually doing any work? Or are you relying on divine inspiration? And I would say, please do both, but do the first one first.
Yeah, I think that's sensible.
If you don't do any work, you're looking for miracles at this stage. Revision time must be timetabled after school, and it does not include homework. Your revision now is primary. The homework is secondary to this.
That's a good point, because I think some students think, if they've done an hour or two of homework, well, that's part of what might come up seeping into my brain, but treat them very separately.
Oh yeah, the homework is what you have to do for next day. The revision is what you have to do for the exam. And all revision now for third and sixth years should be working on from your past exam papers. That's the best way to do it. And each time you start a new question, get a new A4 sheet, put the name of the question on top of it and bullet point your answer. You get a lot more done within the time that you're revising. I would say 60 uninterrupted minutes. And by that I mean, if possible at all, the phone shouldn't be near you. Your laptop, fine, to help with whatever you need to research on. But get rid of the phone, because you're answering Snapchat and TikTok and all the rest of that nonsense. And that's dragging you away from this bit of time. Remember, this is only a few weeks. After this, you can do whatever you want. 60 uninterrupted minutes, and then followed by a 15-minute break. Get out in the air, kick a ball, and get back in to do the next one. That's particularly for leaving certs. Stop texting and scrolling during revision. You really, and it's very hard for young people because they grow up with the phone.
Oh, the temptation.
But the phone needs to be put away, Alan. That's why I like schools which have study centres, because, it has to be put away for them to concentrate. And we're beginning to see the damage that phones are doing to education and to concentration generally. And finally, I'd say you never hear this from me, I'd say to exam students, get selfish. You need now to spend time on your own with your revision in your study, because this is about you and college and your work placement. It's not about your friends. It's about you. I'd say get selfish and get off your ass.
Okay, as good a line as any on which to finish. This is why we're getting behind the campaign to build a statue in Kilkee to John Burns. We get on to Mike McTighe, you can start chiselling it. John, thank you very much as ever. If you ever have any questions on educational matters for John, do send them in to us, 086 1800 964.